In this video, I'm going to go through some of the easiest, hardiest, exotic looking plants that you can grow here in the UK. So the plants in this list are basically very easy to look after. They're pretty much pest free, they can tolerate lots of conditions, and the most important thing is they are hardy. But when I say they're hardy, I mean they'll easily brush off -10 and much lower in some cases. So fantastic for pretty much all of the UK. When I say they're hardy, it means you don't have to do anything in winter to look after these plants. So that means no protection, no shelters, no wrapping them up with fleece or straw, no mulching, no lifting, none of that business whatsoever. If you want to grow easy plants but you want to have an exotic garden, then these are the plants that I would recommend. So I know a lot of people want an exotic garden, but they don't want to go through the trouble of wrapping plants up for winter, and they want to make sure the garden looks good all year round. Well, all the plants on this list, like I mentioned, are hardy, and more importantly are evergreen, so they look good 12 months of the year, 365 days. Rain, shine, sun or snow, the plant will still look good, won't dry out, won't lose the leaves or anything like that. They'll just battle through and give that exotic look no matter where you're growing these plants in the country.
Eucalyptus Forciflora debouvilii. Probably the hardest thing about this plant is pronouncing its name, but it's also known as the Dronama snowgum. And the reason it's worth growing this tree is it's evergreen, it's hardy, and it has stunning foliage and even more impressive bark as well. So it is a eucalyptus tree, so it will grow into a large plant, into a tree, easily 5 meters tall, but it is one of the smaller growing eucalyptus, and it is a bit more manageable if you have a smaller space to plant it. But like all eucalyptus trees, it's best grown away from any buildings, so the end of the garden would probably be ideal. This plant itself, the leaves are steely bluey glaucous green, evergreen, so they look good all year round, and it flowers pretty much every year, white little sort of like pom-pom flowers as well. And the bark is incredible. It is steely white and also green and fawn and brown and all sorts of shades that sort of come off in layers, beige as well. Really interesting bark, always something good to look at with this plant all year round. And it can grow in pretty much any conditions in terms of the soil. It ideally wants well drained conditions, and ideally neutral to acid soil is best, but I've found it will grow in my alkaline soil as well. As long as the soil is well drained, this is a very forgiving, easy plant. It will quickly grow into a substantial plant, into a tree, and it'll be a great feature tree to have in the garden as well, and it gives a really good backdrop to other exotic plants you may be growing. As long as you don't grow it in waterlogged soil, it will happily survive for many years, easily down to -10. Ideally, it doesn't want to be having the full force of the winter storms as it does in my garden. Probably the most beautiful evergreen tree you can grow hardy or otherwise in the UK. Fargesia robusta. Fargesia robusta is a very low maintenance, stunning evergreen bamboo that's ideal for hedging and screens in the garden. It will tolerate a wide range of conditions, again like all the other plants on this list. Ideally it will have lots of good moisture retentive soil at the base, but it can cope with drier conditions, and I've had it growing next to conifers where the soil's pretty dry and it's grown really well. Height wise, it grows easily to 3 meters, 3.5 meters, so it can be quite a tall hedge if you grow it for that reason, but it makes a really good screen to block out housing if you live in an area with lots of houses nearby, and a good statement plant if you wish in the middle of the garden, as it will be a tall fountain-like plant with delicate green leaves You can feed it in spring if you wish, but even if you don't feed it, this plant, as the name implies, is robust and tall, very forgiving with the conditions. The growth of this plant happens quite early in the year for bamboos, so we get a new flush of growth in early spring, and then by the end of spring into early summer, all the new canes will be at their full height. You can thin it out if you wish, and it really adds that exotic, deep forest-like feel to the garden. Trachycarpus fortunei. Trachycarpus fortunei, or the Chusan palm, is by far and away the best choice for a palm tree for a UK or similar climate. Very easy to get hold of, can either be grown from seed, very hardy, very adaptable to pretty much all soil conditions, pest free, and it does give that truly exotic statement plant for the garden. For the UK, it's pretty much the hardiest palm you can grow, and it's pretty steady grower, and it will grow every year, leaves coming out throughout the growing season from March all the way through to October and even November. The entire trunk is covered in coarse shaggy hairs, so it's very easy to distinguish from pretty much any other plant you can see in the garden. Although it's best in a sunny spot, it can be grown in shade as well, where it will grow deeper green leaves. It will be slower growing, but the form of it will be sort of more elongated, so it can even look even more tropical. It's pretty much pest free, and it can grow in any soil. The only thing to watch out for, like pretty much everything, is don't grow it in waterlogged conditions, don't grow it in swampy areas. This is probably the #1 must-have exotic looking plant for the garden. Very, very easy to look after, and it can be grown and bought from pretty much any garden centre. Fargesia, rufa and similar is a native of China and is a bamboo that doesn't spread too much, it doesn't send out runners, and it grows to about 1.5 meters tall and wide. And the good thing about this plant is you know that its ultimate height is about, like I said, 1 meter and 1.5 meters tall. So if you want a short hedge, you can grow this as a hedge and it won't need clipping at the top. And if you want it as a focal plant, you can do so as well, and it won't swamp out other plants as long as you give it sort of a 2 meter by 2 meter space, because it will slowly spread out a little bit, but it won't send out those runners like the Phylostachys and Sasa bamboos. It's a really good doer. It will easily cope with -10 and probably much lower as well. And it has a very elegant form if you leave it to naturally sort of arch over, or you can clip it as well into a cube or other shapes if you want a bit of a more formal appearance. But for that exotic, almost oriental plant for the garden, this is hard to beat. Acuba japonica, or the Japanese laurel or spotted laurel, is a very good tough shrub with evergreen leaves, lanceolate in shape, and they are glossy and they can cope with all sorts of conditions. This is probably the best exotic evergreen plant for dry shade. They can cope, like I said, with sun, but the best in shade. They can go with moist conditions and dry conditions. So very, very rare in the plant world to get a plant that's so accommodating to so many different conditions and still grow well. As well as the really interesting leaves, which I said can be spotted or glossy green, serrated edges or smooth, and you do get these red berries in the autumn and winter months. And the best thing about this plant, like I said, is very, very hard to kill. So if you want a plant that can just be planted and left alone, don't need to feed it or water it necessarily, and it will be a good background plant for other things that you grow in front of it, because it can cope with those shady conditions as a background plant, and then other plants can just pop in front of it. Trachycarpus wagneranus, pretty much the same as Trachycarpus fortunei, except the leaves are much shorter and much stiffer. I'm including it in the list because it is very distinctive from fortunei, because the leaves are a very different feel to them and size. So they are smaller than the fortunei leaves, and they're also normally a deeper green as well. And because they're shorter and stiffer, it means they're more wind resistant, so ideal if you've got a bit more of an exposed windy location. It grows similar to fortunei with a shaggy trunk, and it will grow a single stem over many years, and it's not quite as quick as fortunei, but it still steadily grows pretty well into a substantial tree over 10-15 years in time. Again, it's not really affected by any pests or diseases, happily grow in all conditions, and it's just a good doer for the garden, a really good exotic backdrop plant and a focal point if you wish to do so because of the distinctive trunk and the leaves. It flowers like fortunei in the spring as well, with those distinctive yellow flowers. All in all, a wonderful plant to add an exotic feel, and another palm tree other than fortunei that is definitely hardy down to -10 and below. Fatsia japonica, or the false castor oil plant, a very tropical looking and very readily available plant that you can grow in deep shade in your garden for a jungle effect. The leaves themselves are glossy green and palmate, and you can sometimes find this actually in the houseplant section. Don't let that deter you, as it is truly a hardy plant, very forgiving wherever you plant it, although it's best in shade for the deepest green leaves. It will produce flowers as well at the end of autumn into winter, sort of white flowers followed by little black inedible berries, but it's the foliage that we grow this plant for. It will grow over time to about 2.5 meters tall and wide, but it can easily be cut back. You can either cut back a branch down to ground level, or you can cut it back to shape it however you wish. It's not an irritant as such, so it's not a hazardous plant to have in the garden. It's got soft foliage, and the only bugs you might get affecting it, and the newest leaves might be affected by greenfly and caspid bugs, but generally it's not a big problem. It will soon outgrow any damage, and it doesn't damage the plant in any detrimental way, to be honest. You can grow this, like I said, in deep shade, and it's best in shade because it keeps the greener leaves. If you grow it in sun, they can go a bit yellow. You can grow it in a wide range of soils, but you do want to have some decent moisture retentive soil. So good garden soil might, really enjoy a bit of added compost or manure to get the luscious growth, but even without that, it'll still grow away very nicely indeed, and a great addition for that exotic jungle effect to the garden. Yucca recurvifolia, probably the easiest growing yucca you can have for the UK because it tolerates such a wide range of conditions. The plant itself is a strappy leaved plant, succulent green leaves that arch over and form large rosettes, and these can branch as well, so you get multiple rosettes of green leaves over many years. And they also flower, and the flowers of these produced in spikes, sort of in spring and summer and sometimes autumn as well, and these can be 1.8 meters or 6 foot tall, and you get creamy white flowers, quite succulent flowers with a lemony scent that bees do adore as well. And you can eat the flowers if you wish. The growing conditions for this plant, well, basically you can grow it pretty much anywhere. You can grow it in full sun, which it prefers, but it can happily adapt to part shade and even shade as a bush. Soil, it can grow in unimproved soil, clay, chalk, sand, loam, gravelly conditions. It doesn't really matter. It will get its big roots down and wide to find the water it needs, but even if it's quite heavy soil, it'll still grow away very well indeed. The only thing you don't want to do is put this in swamp-like boggy conditions, which you won't appreciate. But other than that, it's an easy-going plant. They'll get a substantial clump over the years, easily sort of growing to 2 to 3 meters across and tall over 10-20 years, and you can cut back the heads if you wish. It doesn't suffer any pests or diseases really. You might get some greenfly on the flowers, but that's about it. So a real full hardy plant that you can plant pretty much anywhere. It will get on with it and it will produce beautiful exotic leaves and flower spikes throughout the year.
If you want to grow more exotic plants that might not be quite as hardy as these, then check out this video. We've got a case study of a very exciting plant.